They wanted a viral vacation to Dubai, complete with first-class tickets and five-star suites. They wanted the world to see their perfect sun-kissed life. Instead, what they got was a viral mugshot and a pair of matching steel handcuffs waiting for them at the baggage claim. If you want to know how a 15-year-old girl took down two of the biggest family vloggers in the state by simply telling the truth, stay with me until the end. My name is Maya. I was 15 when the police raided the terminal. To the internet, I was the shy daughter, the quiet, well-behaved prop in the background of the Miller Family Adventure channel. To them, I wasn't a daughter. I was overhead costs. I was a recurring extra who ate too much and grew out of clothes too fast. And so, let me take you to the moment it all ended. Just for a second. So you know where we're going. I wasn't there physically at the airport. I was watching it on a laggy livestream from a social worker's tablet. But I can describe it like I was standing right next to them. The sliding glass doors of the international arrival gate opened, and there they were. Mom was wearing this oversized beige sun hat, and Dad had those mirrored aviators on, pushing a cart stacked with Louis Vuitton luggage. They looked like gold. I mean, literally, their skin was bronzed, their teeth were veneered white, and they were glowing with that specific type of arrogance that only comes from 2 weeks of being weighted on hand and foot. Basically, they saw the cameras flashing and they smiled. They actually waved. They thought it was the fans. They thought the Welcome Home Committee was there to celebrate their subscriber count hitting 1 million. But then, the crowd parted, and it wasn't fans holding Sharpies. It was 4 uniformed officers holding warrants. I watched my mother's smile freeze. It didn't drop. It just calcified. You could see her trying to calculate if this was a prank, or maybe a surprise reality TV show appearance. But then the officer stepped forward, grabbed her wrist, and twisted it behind her back. The sound of the handcuffs ratcheting shut, click, 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 was the first unscripted thing that had happened to my family in 10 years. But to understand why I felt absolutely nothing watching my mother get patted down in front of a stunningly silent crowd, you have to understand the house I lived in. Honestly, calling it a house is a stretch. It was a set. A soundstage? We lived in one of those modern white box mansions in the suburbs, the kind with the echoey foyers and the massive kitchen islands that never have any actual food on them. Every corner of that house was rigged for lighting. We had ring lights clamped to the headboards, tripods in the bathroom, and soundproofing foam disguised as minimalist art on the walls. You have to understand, there was no off switch. My parents didn't have jobs. They were the job. Their entire income depended on selling the image of a chaotic but loving, relatable family. But the reality was so sterile it felt like living in a hospital. I remember this one morning specifically. I must have been around 14. I came downstairs to get breakfast, and the kitchen was set up for a Sunday pancake tradition video. The flour was spilled accidentally on the counter for aesthetic mess, the expensive berries were in a ceramic bowl, and the lighting was perfect. I went to grab an apple because I was starving. My stomach was actually making these loud, embarrassing gurgling noises, and my dad physically intercepted me. He didn't hit me. He never hit me. Bruises are hard to edit out in post-production. Instead, he grabbed my shoulder with this grip that was just a little too tight, smiled his fake white smile, and whispered through his teeth that I needed to get out of the shot because I looked puffy. He told me to go to my room and wait until they had the B-roll footage they needed. And so, I went back upstairs. I sat on my bed for 4 hours while they laughed and threw flour at each other downstairs. I could smell the pancakes cooking. The smell of the vanilla extract and the frying butter was drifting under my door, making me nauseous with hunger. When they finally yelled, "Cut!" I went downstairs hoping for leftovers. But everything was in the trash. The pancakes were cold and rubbery because they had been sitting out for continuity shots, and my mom had sprayed them with hairspray to make them look shinier on camera. And they ordered sushi for themselves, and I ate a packet of instant oatmeal with water from the bathroom tap because I was too afraid to go back into the kitchen and mess up the clean set. Have you ever realized that the people who are supposed to protect you are actually the ones holding the door open for the wolf? Or worse, have you ever realized that they are the wolf, just dressed up in better clothes? It wasn't just the food, it was the psychological erasure. To be fair, I think they loved me once. I have this one ghost memory, you know? I was maybe 3 or 4. The camera wasn't rolling. I had scraped my knee on the driveway, and my mom actually picked me up. She didn't check the lighting. She didn't look for her phone. She just held me and kissed my forehead, and she smelled like lavender laundry detergent, not the expensive, sharp perfume she wore later. I miss that mom. I grieved her every single day. But looking at the woman who was currently screaming at me because I wore the wrong shade of blue for the spring haul thumbnail, I knew that mom was dead. She had been replaced by a content creator. By the time I was 15, I was invisible. I was the reluctant teenager character in their skits. They monetized my depression. If I looked sad, they titled the video Teen Angst, Dealing with Our Daughter's Moods, and raked in 50,000 views. If I stayed in my room, they made a video about respecting boundaries while filming through the crack in my door. And here is where it gets crazy. About 2 weeks before the incident, things got tight. The algorithm was changing, views were down, and the brand deals were drying up. My parents were stressed. You could feel the tension vibrating off them like heat off pavement. They were fighting constantly about engagement metrics and click-through rates. My dad's solution was to go big. He decided they needed a luxury travel vlog series, Dubai, top tier, the Burj Khalifa, the gold markets, the dune buggies. It was going to cost a fortune, but he was convinced it was the investment that would save the channel. They sat me down at the dining table, the one we were never allowed to eat at because it was made of imported glass, and gave me the pitch. My mom did most of the talking. She had this frantic energy, her eyes wide and unblinking. She told me that tickets were too expensive to take me. She said it was a business trip for the brand and that I would be perfectly fine at home. "You're 15 now, Maya," she said, reaching out to touch my hand, but stopping halfway when she saw her nail polish was chipped. "You're practically an adult. It's just 2 weeks. One will leave you plenty of money for groceries, and the pantry is stocked." My first instinct was to beg. I wanted to scream that I didn't want to be alone in that mausoleum of a house for 14 days. But I looked at my dad. He was already scrolling on his phone, looking at hotel reviews. He didn't even look up. He just mumbled that I should be grateful they trusted me this much. I'm sitting there thinking, trust? This wasn't trust. This was convenience. Taking me meant buying another ticket, another hotel room, and dealing with a teenager who didn't smile on command. Leaving me behind was a budget cut. It was a line-item veto. And get this, they actually made me film a goodbye video. They made me stand in the driveway, waving at the Uber that was taking them to the airport, I pretending to be the supportive daughter waving off her hardworking parents. "Have fun. I'll miss you," they made me say. We did 4 takes because I didn't sound enthusiastic enough. Finally, they got the shot. The Uber driver loaded the last Louis Vuitton bag. My mom blew a kiss to the camera, not to me, to the lens, and got in. As the car pulled away, the silence hit me. It was heavy. It was absolute. I stood there on the driveway for a long time, watching the taillights disappear. I walked back into the house, and the air was already starting to feel different. Stale. I walked to the kitchen island where my mom said she left the cash for groceries. I saw an envelope. I opened it. And honestly, I just started laughing. It was a hysterical, dry laugh that hurt my throat. Inside the envelope wasn't cash. It was a stack of coupons. Coupons for local pizza places, a gift card to a frozen yogurt shop with $15 left on it, and a single $50 bill. $50. For 2 weeks. For everything. I walked to the pantry. She said it was stocked. I opened the double doors. There were 6 boxes of Skinny Tea Detox Mix, a sponsored product they were pushing last month. There was a bag of stale rice. There were endless rows of condiments, truffle oil, balsamic glaze, saffron threads, but no actual food. No bread, no eggs, no pasta, just props. I stood there, holding that $50 bill, looking at a pantry full of laxative tea and expensive garnish, and I felt something snap. It wasn't sadness anymore. It was cold. It was the kind of cold that starts in your marrow and freezes your heart solid. I realized then that they didn't care if I ate. Niente, they didn't care if I was safe. They assumed I would figure it out, or starve quietly enough not to disturb the neighbors. And that's when I decided. I wasn't going to just survive this. I was going to document it. If they wanted content, I was going to give them the best content of their lives. So, basically, the first 48 hours were this weird mix of freedom and panic. At first, I tried to convince myself it was a challenge. You know, like one of those surviving on $10 videos my parents would watch to mock poor people. I took that $50 bill and walked 3 miles to the nearest discount grocery store because I didn't want to waste money on an Uber. I bought the cheapest bread, a jar of generic peanut butter, a crate of ramen, and some apples. I walked back carrying those plastic bags, and the handles were digging into my palms, cutting off the circulation. I remember looking at my hands. They were turning purple, and thinking about my mom getting a manicure at the airport spa. I rationed everything. I made a spreadsheet in a notebook. 2 slices of bread for breakfast, 1 pack of ramen for dinner, and if I got hungry in between, I drank water. I was terrified of running out. I thought, okay, if I'm smart, if I'm disciplined, I can make this last until they get back. I was still trying to be the good daughter. I was still trying to solve the problem they created so they wouldn't have to deal with it. But then, day 3 happened. It was around 7 p.m. The sun had already gone down, and the house was huge and dark. I was in the kitchen, boiling water for my nightly ramen. The stove was electric. The lights were on. The refrigerator was humming that low, steady drone that you don't even notice until it stops. And then, click. The darkness was instant. It wasn't a flicker. It was a hard cut. The stove light died. The hum of the refrigerator silenced. The Wi-Fi router lights in the hallway blinked out. At first, I thought it was a power outage. A storm, maybe? A blown fuse? I sat there in the pitch black, holding a pot of lukewarm water, waiting for it to come back on. I waited 10 minutes, then 30, then an hour. I felt my way to the utility drawer and found a flashlight. The beam cut through the dark house like a spotlight in a horror movie. I went to the breaker box in the basement. Everything was flipped to on. Nothing had tripped. I went outside. This is important. I walked out into the cul-de-sac. Every other house on the street was blazing with light. The neighbors were watching TV. I could see the blue glow in their windows. The porch lights were on. It was just us. Just our house. A black hole in the middle of a sea of light. And here is where it gets crazy. My first instinct wasn't anger. It was shame. I thought I had done something. I thought maybe I used too much power boiling the water. It makes no sense now. But when you're raised in a house where everything is always your fault, you assume the darkness is your fault too. I went back inside. The temperature was already dropping. It was late November. The house, for all its luxury finishes, had terrible insulation. It was all glass and high ceilings, impossible to heat, and impossible to keep warm once the furnace died. By the next morning, the house was 50 degrees. I woke up shivering under 3 blankets. I could see my breath in the bedroom air. I went downstairs to get food, and the silence of the house was deafening. The refrigerator was warm. I opened it, and the smell hit me. It wasn't rotting yet, but it was that stale, dead air of an appliance that has become a coffin. The expensive cheeses were sweating oil. The almond milk was lukewarm. I didn't have a phone plan. My parents only let me use Wi-Fi to limit my screen time. So with the router dead, I was completely cut off. No internet, no calls. Just me and the cold. I needed to know why. I needed to understand what was happening. So I broke the one rule that was drilled into me since birth. Never enter the home office. The office was my dad's sanctuary. It was where the editing happened, where the business was done. I picked the lock with a bobby pin, a trick I learned from YouTube when I was bored and locked in my room. The door clicked open. I started digging. I wasn't looking for anything specific, just a clue. A bill? A receipt? I found the urgent pile on the desk. It was buried under fan mail. And there it was. A letter from the electric company. But it wasn't just a past due notice. I held the paper up to the window to read it in the daylight. It was a confirmation letter. It basically stated that per the request of the account holder, the service was scheduled to be temporarily suspended for the billing cycle starting November 15th, the day they left. I sat down on the expensive ergonomic office chair. I read it again. Voluntary suspension. You have to understand, they didn't forget to pay the bill. They chose to turn it off. They did the math. They calculated that saving 2 weeks of heating and electricity for a 5,000 square foot house was worth more than my comfort. They figured since I was just one person, I didn't need the whole house heated. They probably thought the residual heat would last, or maybe they just didn't think about me at all. They were looking at the bottom line. I was an expense they could minimize. That was the moment. It wasn't the hunger that broke me. It wasn't the cold. It was the calculation. Have you ever realized that your pain is just a line item on someone else's budget? That your suffering is essentially a saving strategy? I sat in that chair for a long time. My hands were shaking, but not from the cold anymore. I felt this heat rising up in my chest. It was rage. Pure, distilled rage. For a second, I thought about the mom who used to cut my sandwiches into triangles. I thought, maybe there's a mistake. Maybe they didn't know I would be here. But no. They looked me in the eye. They gave me the coupons. They knew. I went back to the kitchen. I ate cold peanut butter off a spoon because I couldn't cook the ramen. The water in the pipes was freezing. That night, the temperature inside the house hit 40 degrees. I put on my winter coat, my gloves, and 2 pairs of socks. I dragged my mattress into the smallest walk-in closet in the hallway because smaller rooms hold body heat better. I curled up in a ball, shivering so hard my teeth were chattering like castanets. And I lay there, in the dark, visualizing them. I pictured them in Dubai. It would be 90 degrees there. They were probably in a hotel room with the AC blasting. I'm complaining that it was too cold. They were eating room service. They were laughing. I started to hate them. Not the teenage, I hate my parents kind of way. I mean the biblical kind of hate. The kind where you want to watch their world burn just to warm your hands on the fire. I realized I had 2 choices. Choice A. I could curl up and wait. I could suffer. I could survive, barely. And when they came back, they would say, "Oh, wow, you're so dramatic. It wasn't that cold." And they would film a video about our daughter's resilience. They would monetize my survival. Choice B. I could stop being the prop. I could become the director. I didn't sleep that night. I lay awake, listening to the wind howl against the windows, and I formulated the plan. I knew where the spare keys were. I knew where the backup batteries for the cameras were kept. I knew the passcodes. By the time the sun came up, I wasn't shivering anymore. I was calm. I was deadly calm. I got up. I didn't brush my teeth because the water was too cold to put in my mouth. I walked into the living room. I found the hidden safe in the floorboards. I'd watched my dad punch in the code 1,000 times. 1122, the date of their wedding. Narcissists are predictable. I opened it. Inside wasn't money. It was their gear. The backup Sony A7S3 camera, the shotgun mic, the memory cards, the tools of their trade. I took the camera out. I felt the weight of it in my hands. It was heavy, cold, and professional. This was the weapon they used to build their empire. This was the machine that stole my childhood. I put a fresh battery in. I flipped the screen out so I could see myself. I looked terrible. My lips were chapped and blue. My skin was pale. My eyes had dark circles that looked like bruises. I was wearing a beanie and a parka inside my own living room. Perfect. I hit the red record button. The tally light blinked on. "Welcome back to the channel," I whispered, my voice raspy from the dry air. "Today, I'm going to give you a house tour, but it's not the one you're used to." I didn't cry. Crying is for victims. I wasn't a victim anymore. I was a whistleblower. I walked to the thermostat on the wall. The digital display was blank because the power was dead, but I had a thermometer I found in the first aid kit. I taped it to the wall next to the thermostat. It read 38 degrees Fahrenheit. "It's currently 38 degrees inside the Miller family home," I said to the camera, keeping the lens steady. "My parents are in Dubai. They turned off the heat to save money. Let me show you what they left me to eat." I began the investigation. So, I started the tour. I treated the camera like a crime scene photographer treats a lens. I didn't shake. I didn't rush. I moved with this weird robotic precision. I started in the pantry. I held the camera up to the shelves that looked so full in their pantry organization videos. You know the ones where everything is in matching glass jars with cute chalkboard labels? I zoomed in on the jar labeled quinoa. I unscrewed the lid with one hand while holding the camera with the other. It was empty. Just a dusting of grain at the bottom. "Prop," I whispered. I moved to the snack bin. Empty. I moved to the baking essentials. The flour jar was full, but it was crawling with weevils because it hadn't been changed in 3 years. I walked to the fridge. I opened the door, and the camera light illuminated the sad, dark interior. I filmed the expiration date on the milk. It was 3 weeks old. I filmed the empty vegetable crisper. I filmed the single shriveled lemon sitting on the middle shelf. "This is what they left me," I said. "And this is the temperature." I panned the camera to the thermometer I had placed inside. It read 55 degrees. Warmer than the house, actually. But I knew this wasn't enough. Showing an empty fridge makes them look negligent, sure. But bad parents exist everywhere. To really nail them, to make sure they couldn't spin this as, "Oh, she just ate all the food and is lying," I needed proof of intent. I needed to prove they planned this. I went back to the office. The room was freezing. The leather chair was like sitting on a block of ice. My dad's iMac was sitting there, a sleek silver monolith. I pressed the power button. Nothing happened. Right. No power. I sat there for a second, feeling the panic start to creep in. How do I get the digital evidence if the computer won't turn on? Then I remembered the emergency power station. It was a massive battery bank they used for field shoots, designed to charge drone batteries in the desert. They had reviewed it on the channel 6 months ago. The battery that saved our trip. I hauled it out of the closet. It was heavy, maybe 40 pounds. I plugged the iMac into the battery's AC outlet. I held my breath. Chime. The Apple logo appeared. The screen glowed, illuminating my face in the dark room. Now for the password. My dad thought he was a genius, but his cybersecurity was a joke. He used the same 3 passwords for everything. I tried the first one. Miller Time 2024. Incorrect. I tried the second one. Subscribers 1 million. Incorrect. The screen shook. No. I paused. My fingers were stiff from the cold. I blew on them to warm them up. I thought about what mattered to him right now. What was the only thing he cared about? I typed, Dubai Dreams. Click. The desktop loaded. I felt a rush of adrenaline that was sharper than caffeine. I was in. I navigated straight to the email client. I didn't look at the browser history. I didn't want to know. I went to the sent folder. I scrolled back to November 10th, 5 days before they left, and there it was. A subject line that made my stomach drop. Subject, account 88429. Temporary disconnection request. I opened it. I zoomed the camera into the screen. The pixels were sharp. The text was black and white. There was no misinterpreting this. I read it out loud for the microphone, my voice shaking just a little bit. It read, "To whom it may concern, please process a temporary suspension of all electrical and gas services for the residents at 42 Oak Creek Drive, effective November 15th. We will be out of the country for an extended duration for business, and the property will be completely vacant during this time. There are no occupants, pets, or necessary appliances requiring power. We wish to avoid any phantom power drain or liability while the home is empty. Please confirm disconnection date. Best, the Miller family." Completely vacant. I stared at those 2 words. Completely vacant. They hadn't just left me. They had legally erased me. They had told the utility company, in writing, that I didn't exist. They did it to save... what? $100? $200? I did the math in my head. The flight to Dubai was first-class Emirates. That's roughly $12,000 per ticket. They spent $24,000 on flights, but they cut the heat to save $200, knowing their daughter was inside. Have you ever stared at a screen and realized that to the people you love, you aren't a person? You're just a liability to be managed? I didn't cry. Honestly, I think my tear ducts were frozen. But I felt this physical reaction that I can only describe as a system failure. My ears started ringing, a high-pitched whine that drowned out the wind outside. My vision tunneled. I scrolled down. There was a reply from the power company. Request confirmed. Service will be severed at the pole on November 15th. Please note, this will disable all heating, security systems, and refrigeration. Please confirm the house is fully winterized. And my dad's reply, sent from his iPhone. Confirmed. Shut it down. Shut it down. I took a picture of the screen with my phone. Then I took a screenshot on the computer. Then I forwarded the entire email chain to a burner Gmail account I had just created on the library Wi-Fi the week before. I sat back in the chair. The ringing in my ears stopped, replaced by the sound of my own heartbeat. It was slow, heavy. Thump, thump. I looked at the camera, which was still recording. They told the power company the house was empty. I said to the lens. They lied. I'm here, and I'm freezing. I wasn't just a daughter anymore. I was evidence. But I wasn't done. I knew that child endangerment charges stick better when you have a timeline. I needed to prove not just that they did it, but that they were ignoring the consequences right now. I went to their social media manager platform, Hootsuite. It was logged in. This is the dashboard where they see all their comments and DMs across Instagram, YouTube, and TikTok in one place. I saw the Filtered Messages tab. I clicked it. There were messages from my aunt, my mom's sister, who we were forbidden to talk to because she was toxic, aka she was poor. I opened the thread. November 17th, 2 days ago. Hey, tried calling the house landline. It's dead. Is Maya okay? November 17th, Auto reply. The Miller family is currently creating magic in Dubai. For business inquiries, contact our agent. November 18th. Yesterday. Seriously, Linda. It's freezing here in Jersey. Is the heat on in the house? Maya isn't answering her cell. And then, a manual reply from my mom's account. Not an auto reply. She had typed this from the hotel room. She's fine, Karen. She's probably sleeping or being dramatic. She has plenty of blankets. Stop trying to create drama. We are working. Do not contact us again. I zoomed in on the timestamp. Sent 4 hours ago. They knew. They knew it was freezing. They knew people were worried. And they blocked them. I saved that screenshot too. My hands were numb, but I felt powerful. I had the smoking gun. Actually, I had the bullets, the gun, and the fingerprints. I ejected the hard drive. I shut down the computer. I put the battery back in the closet. I walked out of the office and stood in the dark hallway. The cold was biting now, seeping through my socks. I looked at the front door. I could leave. I could walk to the police station right now. But then I thought, no. If I go to the police now, my parents get a phone call. They get a lawyer. They spin the story before they even land. They'll say it was a misunderstanding, a clerical error. They'll post a tearful apology video and their fans will forgive them. I didn't want an apology. I wanted a demolition. I needed to wait. I needed them to walk into the trap. Basically, I spent the next 4 hours turning my trauma into a documentary. I had about 20% battery left on the emergency power station. That was my countdown. I fired up Final Cut Pro, the same software my dad used to edit out his temper tantrums, and I went to work. I wasn't just dumping raw files. I was building a case. I dragged the clip of the empty pantry onto the timeline. I layered the screenshot of the shut it down email over it. I added the clip of the thermometer reading 38 degrees. I synced the audio of the wind howling against the glass. I worked with a kind of feverish intensity. My fingers were stiff, clumsy lumps of ice, so I had to keep stopping to blow on them or tuck them into my armpits to get the feeling back. But my mind was sharp. I was thinking like a prosecutor. What will the defense say? They'll say the food was hidden. Cut to the clip of me opening every single cabinet. They'll say the power outage was an accident. Cut to the request for disconnection, PDF. I exported the file. The progress bar crawled across the screen. Rendering, 10%, 50%, 90%. Ding. Project. The truth. Saved to the desktop. I dragged it onto a thumb drive. I pulled the drive out. It was small, silver, and cold. It looked like nothing, but it held the weight of my entire childhood. I shut everything down. I put the cables back exactly where I found them. I locked the office door. I wanted the house to look exactly as they left it. I wanted them to walk in, confident, arrogant, and completely unaware that the landmine was already armed. I went upstairs and packed a backpack. I didn't take much. Just my phone, the thumb drive, my birth certificate, which I stole from the filing cabinet years ago, and the one photo I had of me and my grandma before she died. I walked out of the house. The air outside was actually warmer than the air inside. That's how bad it had gotten. I didn't lock the front door. I left it unlocked. Let the pipes burst. Let the raccoons get in. It wasn't my house anymore. It was a crime scene. I walked the 2 miles to the police station. I didn't run. I just walked, one foot in front of the other, listening to the crunch of the dead leaves under my boots. I felt light. For the first time in 15 years, I wasn't carrying their secrets. I was carrying them to the people who could actually do something about it. When I got to the station, I didn't cry. I didn't do the scared little girl routine. I walked up to the desk sergeant, a big guy with a mustache who looked like he was bored out of his mind, and I placed the thumb drive on the counter. And I told him that I wanted to report a case of child abandonment and endangerment. I told him my name. I told him my parents were currently on Emirates flight EK201, scheduled to land in 12 hours. He looked at me. He looked at my blue lips. He looked at the thumb drive. He called a detective. And here is where the competence porn really kicks in. You always worry the police won't believe you, right? That they'll say, "Go home to your parents." But the second that Detective Miller, no relation thankfully, plugged that drive in and watched the video, the mood in the room shifted. I watched his face. He started out leaning back in his chair, skeptical. Then he saw the empty fridge. He leaned forward. Then he saw the email where my dad wrote, "Shut it down." He froze. His jaw muscle jumped. That little micro-expression of pure disgust told me everything I needed to know. He wasn't looking at a rebellious teen, he was looking at a felony. He didn't ask me stupid questions. He picked up the phone. He started barking orders. He used words like priority, warrant, and airport jurisdiction. He looked at me and told me, in this very serious, low voice, that I wasn't going back to that house. He said social services was on the way and that they were going to intercept my parents at the gate. He asked if I wanted to be there when they landed. I thought about it. I thought about seeing them in handcuffs. I thought about the look on my dad's face when he realized his perfect production had been hijacked. "No," I said. "I don't want to see them. I just want to know when it's done." So the trap was set. The flight was in the air. They were 30,000 feet up, sipping champagne, thinking they were flying home to a viral success. They had no idea that the ground beneath them had already crumbled. So I spent the next 12 hours in a small beige room at the Department of Child and Family Services. It smelled like stale coffee and photocopier toner, a smell that, to this day, makes me feel safer than the smell of lavender laundry detergent ever did. They gave me a blanket, a cup of hot chocolate that was basically just sugar sludge, and a tablet. The social worker, a woman named Sarah who looked like she hadn't slept in a decade, told me I didn't have to watch. She said I could play Candy Crush or watch Netflix. She said I should try to disconnect. But I couldn't. I needed to see them. I needed to see the before so I could fully savor the after. I pulled up Instagram. I went to the Miller Family Adventures page. And honestly, looking at their stories while my body was still thawing out from 3 days of hypothermia, it was a form of psychological torture. The first story was posted 10 hours ago. It was a video tour of their first-class suite on Emirates. You know the one, with the sliding gold doors and the personal minibar? My dad was filming. He panned the camera over the leather seat, the massive TV screen, and then landed on my mom. She was wearing a silk eye mask pushed up on her forehead, holding a glass of Dom Perignon. She waved at the camera with this fake, pouty face and said, I kid you not, that she was heartbroken to be leaving Dubai. But she couldn't wait to get home and squeeze her baby girl. I'm sitting there, wrapped in a scratchy government-issue blanket, watching this woman pretend to miss the daughter she left to freeze, and I felt like I was going to vomit. And the disconnect between the character she played on screen and the monster she was in real life was so sharp it felt like it cut me. I tapped to the next story. It was a photo of their dinner. Caviar, lobster thermidor, white linen tablecloths. The caption read, "Fueling up for the grind. Creating content is hard work, but we do it for our family. #hustle, #blessed. Hard work. I looked at my hands. The skin on my knuckles was cracked and bleeding from the dry, cold air in the house. My lips were split. I had lost 4 pounds in 3 days because I was rationing peanut butter, and they were eating lobster at 30,000 feet, talking about the grind. Have you ever watched someone perform love for an audience while knowing for a fact that they are incapable of feeling it in private? It makes you question if anything you ever saw was real. I kept watching. It was like picking at a scab. I couldn't stop. There was a boomerang of them clinking glasses, a video of my dad showing off his new Rolex, probably bought with the money they saved on my heating bill, a clip of them getting ready to land, spraying expensive facial mist on themselves so they would look dewy for the arrival photos. And the comments? God, the comments were the worst part. You guys are such an inspiration. Parent goals. Maya is so lucky to have parents who work so hard for her. I wanted to scream. I wanted to reach through the screen and shake every single one of those strangers. I wanted to type, "I'm hungry. I'm cold. They left me." But I didn't. I let them have their moment. I let them build the pedestal as high as possible. It's because the higher they climbed, the farther they were going to fall. While I was watching their digital parade, the real world was moving in silence. Detective Miller had come back into the room a few times to give me updates. He was calm, professional, but I could see the edge in his voice. He told me that they had contacted the Port Authority police. He told me that they had verified the vacancy email with the utility company. He told me that a judge had signed the warrant less than an hour after viewing my video. He described the setup to me, and it sounded like a military operation. Basically, because my parents were public figures, in their own minds at least, and because the charges involved a minor, the police weren't taking chances. They weren't going to just knock on the door next week. They were going to make a statement. They had officers waiting at the jet bridge. They had officers waiting at baggage claim. They had alerted the airport press pool, not explicitly, but you know how these things work. When police cars swarm a terminal, the paparazzi start paying attention. My parents wanted a viral arrival? They were getting one. I watched the flight tracker on the tablet. The little plane icon was inching across the Atlantic. It crossed over Maine, then Massachusetts. Then it started its descent into New York. My heart was hammering against my ribs. It wasn't fear anymore. It was anticipation. It was the feeling you get right before the roller coaster drops. I saw a new notification pop up on my mom's phone. Well, on her Instagram. They had landed. They had taxiing service. The story was a selfie. The two of them, looking tan, rested and glowing. My mom had fresh lipstick on. My dad had his sunglasses on. The caption was, "Touchdown NYC, so excited to be back on home soil. Stay tuned for the Dubai vlog. It's going to be epic." I stared at that photo. I memorized their smiles. I memorized the arrogance in my dad's jawline. I memorized the way my mom tilted her head to hide her bad side. They had absolutely no idea. They thought they were walking into the arms of their adoring fans. They thought they were going to call an Uber, drive home, walk into a freezing cold house, and maybe yell at me for not cleaning the gutters while they were gone. They thought the script was still running, but the script had been burned. I put the tablet down on the desk. I closed my eyes. I pictured the sliding glass doors at the international arrivals terminal. I pictured the crowd. I pictured the moment the air conditioning of the airport hit their faces. I took a deep breath. For the first time in 3 days, my lungs didn't hurt from the cold. "Showtime," I whispered to the empty room. And so, the moment finally arrived. The climax. The season finale they never planned for. I was watching the live stream from a local news channel on the tablet. The reporter was standing right outside the international arrivals gate at JFK, her breath misting in the cold air, talking about a breaking story regarding a high-profile influencer couple. The camera was pointed directly at those frosted glass doors, the frosted doors of destiny, as I called them in my head. You have to understand the layout. At international arrivals, there's this long, intimidating walkway where passengers have to push their carts past a gauntlet of people holding signs. Usually, it's just limo drivers and bored relatives. But today, it was a sea of blue uniforms. Detective Miller hadn't just sent a couple of beat cops, he had arranged a full reception. There were 4 officers from the Port Authority, 2 detectives from the Special Victims Unit, and, this is the part that really set the scene, a swarm of paparazzi who had caught wind of the scandal while the plane was still over the Atlantic. Basically, my video hadn't just gone to the police. The police report had leaked, or maybe Detective Miller accidentally let it slip, and the media smelled blood. The doors hissed open. At first, it was just regular people, tired businessmen, families dragging screaming toddlers, backpackers looking confused by the police presence. The crowd parted for them, sensing the tension. And then I saw the Louis Vuitton luggage. They emerged like royalty. My dad was pushing the cart, chest puffed out, walking with that confident, long stride gait he used when he knew people were watching. My mom was trailing slightly behind, checking her reflection in her phone screen, adjusting her oversized sunglasses. They look like $1 million. They look like the epitome of success. And here is where it gets crazy. They actually stopped in the doorway to pose. I mean, literally, they stopped the flow of foot traffic to strike a casual "we're home" pose. My dad did a little wave. My mom flashed her veneers. They saw the cameras flashing and assumed it was for them. They assumed the police were there for crowd control, to protect them from their adoring public. But then, the atmosphere shifted. It wasn't a cheer. It was a silence, a heavy, judgmental silence that hung in the air like smog. The camera zoomed in on my dad's face. I saw the exact second the confusion hit him. He lowered his hand. He looked at the photographers, and then he looked at the police officers who were stepping forward to block their path. He didn't look scared yet. He looked annoyed. He looked like a VIP who was being inconvenienced by the help. Detective Miller stepped into the frame. He wasn't smiling. He looked like a stone wall in a cheap suit. I couldn't hear the audio perfectly because of the airport noise, but the reporter was describing the scene, and I could read their body language like a book. The detective held up a hand, stopping the luggage cart. My dad immediately started talking. You could see the arrogance dripping off him. He was doing that hand-chopping motion he always did when he was educating someone. He was clearly demanding to know what was going on, probably throwing around phrases like, "Do you know who I am?" and "I'll have your badge." He pointed at the cameras, likely telling the police to back off because they were filming. And that's when the detective did something brilliant. He didn't argue. He didn't shout. He simply pointed up. Then he pointed to the massive LCD monitors hanging above the arrivals waiting area, the ones that usually play CNN or flight information. But they weren't playing flight info. The news crew was broadcasting the B-roll from my video. There, on a 20-foot screen in the middle of JFK International Airport, was the footage of our pantry, the empty shelves, the bag of stale rice, the thermometer reading 38 degrees, and then the screenshot of the email. Subject: temporary disconnection request. Shut it down. I watched my parents look up. I saw my mother's sunglasses slide down her nose. I saw her mouth open, but no sound came out. She stared at the screen, at the evidence of her own cruelty broadcast in high definition to hundreds of strangers. She looked from the screen to the crowd, and for the first time, she saw the disgust. She realized these weren't fans. They were witnesses. My dad froze. He looked like a computer that had just blue-screened. He stared at the email on the monitor, his own words, his own calculated malice, looming over him like a billboard. The detective stepped closer. He pulled a piece of paper from his jacket pocket. The warrant. And this is where the collapse happened. It wasn't graceful. It wasn't cinematic. It was pathetic. My dad started shaking his head. He was backing away, holding his hands up in this frantic, jerky motion. He was arguing, but the arrogance was gone, replaced by a desperate, high-pitched panic. I could tell he was trying to spin it. He was probably saying it was a misunderstanding, a prank, a social experiment. He was pointing at my mom, seemingly trying to throw her under the bus, gesturing that she was the one who managed the house accounts. My mom, on the other hand, just crumbled. She didn't faint. That would have been too elegant. She just sort of melted. Her posture collapsed. She grabbed my dad's arm, but he shook her off. She looked around for an exit, for a friendly face, for a camera to smile at. But there was nowhere to go. The ring of officers had closed in. The detective didn't have patience for the speech. He reached for his belt. The sound of the Velcro on the handcuff pouch is something I will never forget, even though I only heard it through the reporter's microphone. My dad tried to pull away. He physically recoiled, clutching the handle of the luggage cart like it was a life raft. 2 officers moved in. They spun him around. He was shouting now. You could see the cords in his neck straining. He was screaming about his rights, about his lawyer, about how this was going to ruin his brand. They slammed him against the cold, hard surface of the customs desk. The impact knocked his aviators off. They skittered across the floor and were crushed under a policeman's boot. Click, click. My dad, the man who controlled every angle, every light, every narrative, was now restrained. His hands, usually so busy directing everyone else, were pinned behind his back. Then they went for my mom. She didn't fight. She just started sobbing. But it wasn't a sad cry. It was that ugly, gasping hyperventilation of someone who has never been told no in her entire life. She was pleading with the female officer, probably trying to bond with her, trying to use that mom-to-mom voice she used in her videos. The officer didn't even blink. She spun my mom around and cuffed her. And the luggage cart, stacked with $10,000 of designer bags and duty-free perfumes, was left abandoned in the middle of the floor. A symbol of a trip that cost them everything. The cameras were going wild. Flashbulbs were popping like strobe lights. The reporter was shouting over the chaos, confirming that the Millers have been taken into custody on charges of child endangerment and neglect. As they were being led away, doing the perp walk toward the exit, the detective stopped them. He did something I didn't expect. He pulled out his own phone. He looked at the screen, then turned the phone around so my dad could see it. It was a text message. You see, 5 minutes earlier I had texted the detective. I told him to give them a message. I wanted them to know that this wasn't an accident. This wasn't bad luck. This was a production. My production. My dad squinted at the phone screen. His face was pale, sweaty, and stripped of all its filtered perfection. He read the text, and in that moment, our eyes met. Mine through the pixelated live stream, and his through the lens of the news camera. He knew. He knew the quiet prop in the background had finally taken center stage. The detective pulled the phone back and spoke the only line of dialogue that mattered, reading my text out loud to them so the press could hear it perfectly. He looked my father dead in the eye and said, "Maya says, don't worry, I caught it all on camera." My dad's knees gave out. The officers had to drag him the rest of the way to the squad car. Basically, the fallout wasn't just a splash. It was a tsunami. You'd think that after the handcuffs went on, the drama would end. But in the world of family vloggers, the cancellation is always louder than the celebration. The legal process was brutal, but for the first time in my life, the camera wasn't pointing at me. It was pointing at the evidence. The shut it down email became the centerpiece of the prosecution's case. My parents tried to hire a high-profile crisis management PR firm before they even hired a criminal defense attorney, which tells you everything you need to know about their priorities. But the firm dropped them the second they saw the police report. Apparently, starving your teenage daughter to save $200 on heating is a brand risk that even the best spin doctors can't fix. The charges were child endangerment in the first degree and gross negligence. There was talk of a plea deal, but the district attorney wasn't having it. The video I made, the alternate house tour, was played in the courtroom during the bail hearing. I wasn't there, but my Aunt Linda, who I'm living with now, told me about it. She said the courtroom was dead silent. When the part played where I zoomed in on the weevils in the flower, the judge actually took off his glasses and rubbed the bridge of his nose. He denied them bail. He called them a flight risk and, more satisfyingly, a danger to the community's moral fabric. And get this, their defense was that they thought I had gone to a friend's house. That was their lie. They tried to say I was supposed to stay with a friend and I stayed home to frame them. But that email, that specific email where my dad wrote, "The property will be completely vacant," that destroyed them. It proved they knew. It proved they planned for an empty house. That lie was the final nail in the coffin. They were sentenced to 3 years in state prison. Not a life sentence, but for two people who couldn't survive without 1,000 thread count sheets and organic smoothies, it was practically a death sentence. But the financial ruin? That was faster. That happened overnight. The channel was demonetized within 24 hours of the arrest. YouTube put out a statement condemning exploitation of minors. The irony, of course, is that they profited off me for 10 years, but they were quick to cut the cord when the sponsors got spooked. And did they ever get spooked? All those brands, the VPNs, the meal kit delivery services, the teeth whitening strips, they all released generic white text on black background statements on Twitter, distancing themselves from the Miller family brand. The house was foreclosed on about 6 months later. My parents had leveraged it to the hilt to pay for the Dubai trip and the new camera gear. When the income stopped, the bank came knocking. I actually went back one last time. Aunt Linda drove me. There was an estate sale happening. The bank was auctioning off everything inside to recoup the debt. It was surreal. I stood on the sidewalk, wearing a coat that actually kept me warm, and watched strangers walking out with our life. I saw a guy carrying the oversized beanbag chair from the gaming room. I saw a woman buying the set of fake decorative books from the living room shelves. I walked past the garage. There was a dumpster in the driveway. It was full of the stuff that couldn't be sold. I looked inside. It was filled with fan mail. Thousands of letters, drawings, and gifts from subscribers that my parents had never opened. They just hoarded them in boxes to look popular, but they never read them. Seeing those unopened envelopes, covered in glitter and stickers from kids who looked up to us, that hurt more than the empty pantry. It was just so hollow. Have you ever looked at the ruins of your life and realized that the empire was just made of cardboard and lighting tricks all along? But the real ending of this story isn't about them rotting in a cell or the bank seizing the house. It's about the quiet. I live with Aunt Linda now. Her house is small. It's a messy, cluttered 2-bedroom ranch that smells like actual food. Garlic, onions, baking bread, not air freshener. The lighting is bad. It's yellow and dim. There are no ring lights. And the pantry? The first time Linda took me grocery shopping, I had a panic attack in the cereal aisle. I was looking at the prices, trying to calculate the cost per calorie, terrified that we were spending too much. I started hyperventilating. Linda just stopped the cart. She didn't film me. She didn't tell me to calm down for the vlog. She just hugged me. She held me right there in front of the Frosted Flakes until I stopped shaking. Then she told me to pick out whatever I wanted. I picked out a box of the sugary, generic brand cereal that my parents would never have allowed in the house because the packaging wasn't aesthetic. We went home. We ate it at the kitchen table. And that's where I am now. I'm sitting at a scratched-up wooden table eating a bowl of cereal. The heat is on. The thermostat is set to 70 degrees, and nobody is worried about the bill. There are no cameras here. There is no audience. I don't have to smile. I don't have to perform. I think about my parents sometimes. I think about them in their cells, where the lights are fluorescent and the routine is strict. In a way, they finally got what they wanted. They have a captive audience. They have a structured schedule. They are the center of attention in their own little world. But me? I have something better. I have the truth. And for the first time in 15 years, when I walk into the kitchen and open the fridge, the light comes on and it's full. And that, honestly, is the only subscriber count that matters.